So I want to do a quick screencast on blood typing because there were a lot of questions in class today. And I think things were a little confusing because we kept on switching between recipients and donors. So let's do a big overview. So first I want to discuss the different blood types, A, B, AB, and O. So if you have blood type A, that means that you have A antigens on your red blood cell surface, meaning you're going to create anti-B antibodies. And if you have type B blood, you have your B antigens on the cell surface creating anti-A antibodies. If you have type AB blood, that means you have both type B and type A antigens on the cell surface. So you don't want to create any anti-A or anti-B antibodies because these antibodies would attack your own antigens. And if you have type O blood, that means you have no antigens. And because you don't have any antigens here, that means you're going to create antibodies against A antigens and B antigens. So we say we have anti-A and anti-B antibodies. Okay. Now that we got that down, I want to talk about this Rh factor. And the Rh factor is represented by the positive or negative in our blood type. So if we have a positive blood type, that means that we have our Rh antigens on our red blood cell. So I'm going to represent that by these squares. Okay, so these are Rh antigens on our red blood cell. That means we have a positive blood type. If we have a negative blood type, that means that we don't have any antigens on our red blood cell. Now, what does that mean as far as the antibodies that we're going to create? Well, if we have these Rh positive antigens on our red blood cell, we're not going to want to create any antibodies against them. Whereas if we don't have any antigens on our blood, making it negative, we want to create anti-Rh antibodies. Okay, and I'm writing really slow. Anti-Rh, I'm just going to put AB for antibodies. So those anti-Rh antibodies only get created with people that have negative type blood. Okay, so I want to do some examples as far as what antigens you would find on your red blood cell surface. So if I have blood type B plus, that means that I have to have B antigens as well as my positive Rh antigens. Okay, so I have both of those antigens. What does that mean for the antibodies that I create? Well, because I have my B antigen here, that means I'm going to create anti-A antibodies. And do I need any anti-Rh antibodies? No, because I don't want to attack my own cell here with my Rh ones. Okay, now let's talk about blood type B negative. So that means I have B antigens on my cell, but I don't have any Rh antigens. So what type of antibodies do I create here? I create the same anti-A antibodies that I created here in my B positive blood, but what's the difference between the plus and the negative? If you said you're going to create anti-Rh antibodies, you are correct because we don't have these Rh antigens on the cell surface, so now we want to create antibodies against the Rh antigens because those are going to be foreign to us. Now let's do AB negative. So that means I have A antigens, going to be represented by my triangles here. I also have B antigens. So do I want to create any anti-A or anti-B antibodies? No, I don't, because I don't want to attack these antigens on my own cell. Now I don't have any Rh antigens here, so that means I want to create an antibody against that antigen. So I create anti-Rh antibodies if I have AB negative blood. Now let's do O positive blood. So if you remember, blood type O has no antigens on its cell surface. So that means I am now creating antibodies against A and B antigens. So I have anti-A antibodies and anti-B antibodies in type O positive blood. Because I have that positive there, that means that I have the Rh antigen on my cell surface, and that's why I don't create any anti-Rh antibodies. Okay, so I think the two questions that tripped up students the most was, if this patient needed a transfusion, what blood type could this patient safely receive? So you want to think of whatever person you chose. I created a person because I think it's easier to kind of start from scratch instead of referring back. So Mr. Johnson, he's going to have A positive blood. He is the recipient. This is going to be our donor. So if we want to figure out what blood he can safely receive, we got to think about the antibodies that Mr. Johnson has. So if we have our A positive blood, that means we have what antigens on this red blood cell? We are going to have the A antigens, yes. And what does the positive represent? That represents the Rh factor, the Rh antigen. And if it's positive, that means we do have that Rh antigen on our cell surface. Okay? So we don't want to create any anti-A antibodies because we have that on our cell surface. We don't want to create any anti-Rh antibodies because that's on our cell surface. What we want to create antibodies against is the B antigens. So we have anti-B antibodies. So can the person who's donating blood to us have a B antigen on their red blood cell? No, they can't, because our anti-B antibodies from Mr. Jones' blood is going to attack that red blood cell. So what does that leave us with? That's going to leave us with having A antigens as well and Rh antigens. So we can give A positive blood. Now we can't give A B blood because that means that we would have the B antigen on our cell surface. So that's out. We can't give type B blood either because that obviously is going to have B antigens on its cell surface. So we're left with type O. And type O, let me see if this is going to let me erase. I don't think it is. So type O, we know, is going to have no antigens on its cell surface. So the question is it going to matter whether it's O negative or O positive? No, it's not, because we don't have any antibodies against the Rh antigen anyway. So you can give A plus. You can also give A negative blood, because once again, we don't have any antibodies against an Rh factor, which really it would affect the positive anyway. You could give O negative or O positive. Now, the second question asked, what blood types could safely receive this patient's blood? So that means our patient, Mr. Johnson, is now going to be the donor, and we're going to give it to a recipient. So we don't really care about the antibodies that Mr. Johnson has. We're going to care what antibodies the recipient must not have. Okay, so because Mr. Johnson has A positive blood, okay, let's go back and review. What antigens will he have? The A antigen and the Rh antigen. Okay, so that means our recipient of Mr. Johnson's blood can't have any anti-A antibodies to attack his A antigens or any anti-Rh antibodies to attack his Rh antigens. Okay, so what are we left with? Okay, we are left with having, oh, just happened. Sorry about that. Oh, geez. Okay, so I got rid of all my drawing. But anyway, we are left with having our A antigens and our Rh factor. Okay, we have to have those so that we don't create these anti-A antibodies and anti-Rh antibodies. So one of the types that we can one of the types of blood that we can donate Mr. Johnson's blood to is going to be the same blood type, A positive. Okay. Now the other type of blood that we can donate to will actually be AB positive blood. Okay, and that's because AB type blood is our universal recipient. Okay, because it doesn't matter whether we have anti-B antibodies or not. What's most important is that this blood type, AB positive, doesn't create antibodies that will attack the A positive blood. So those are our answers here. I hope this screencast kind of clarified some of this material for you. If you still feel like you're a little confused on this blood typing, please just send me an email, a text, and I'll figure out another way to explain it and simplify it.